Hello, New Tech. How you doing? Here's our next tutorial in the Music App series. And today, just a few extra things to add in. I've got my iPad plugged into my computer today. And to get your iPad or your Android device to work, just make sure that you have these packages installed. You might have to quit out of Unity and go to the Unity Hub app and download those packages. And then once you've done that, the thing to do is to download onto your device the program called Unity Remote. And there's both an iOS and an Android version. Then under the Edit menu, if you go to Project Settings, kind of brings up this window. If for some reason it's really small like this, just drag it out because we need to get these fields here. And it says here under the editor, what is your Unity remote device? And I just click onto one of these because it will then fit the graphic to the screen. Put it on PNG, not JPEG. JPEG is a compressed format, so all of your raw image file things won't show properly. And then put resolution normal. And then what this does is it will mirror your play window on the device. But importantly, you'll get multi-touch input going back into Unity. It will be laggy. And, you know, that's not a great thing about this technique, but it is really handy to see what your app is going to look like on the screen. So then when you press play, you give your device, while Unity Remote is open, a few seconds. And then it will appear on the device and you can hit your phone and get your drums happening that way. And you can see that I can play a bit faster on my phone than I can with my keyboard and mouse. But there's also kind of traction problems too when you're moving a slider. It kind of shows up on the Unity app much faster, but then it won't show up immediately on your device. There's more lag on the video of the device, but you can sort of get an idea of how things will work and where things will actually be located. So it's really useful, and it's kind of instant feedback, rather than going down the process of having to build all the software, open it up in another compiler, put it onto the device itself. It's worth doing that too because that will show you how amazingly fast and responsive it will actually run. But we're not going to be doing that yet. So let's have a look today. There's a few things that I want to explore today. So one of the areas is scripting in Unity. So I want to just get you using your first scripts today. And I want to do some other forms of interaction. So firstly, what I want to do is we've got these sliders at the moment playing the loops, and that can work quite well. And some of you might devise your entire music app around that, and that would be highly appropriate for kind of an ambient music app or maybe a party player or some kind of remixer. But there's quite a few projects I've seen as well that want to have sample loops on buttons. So let's have a look at how we can do that today. So first thing I'm going to do is get into my canvas, and I'm going to have a look at some of these buttons and audio sources. I'm going to duplicate a couple of audio sources first and rename them. Actually, I'm going to name them differently. I'm going to put a different instrument on these, the Japanese koto, or the big surfboard-sized zither instrument. And you can see I've got 4 different koto loops here. And then I'm going to duplicate that again. I'm picking the ones that we already worked out as looping ones. As I already mentioned, every audio track in the audio assets has all been cut and sequenced and fitted together so that they all remain in sync and can be looped. So they all have exactly the same looping length. Okay, so I've got a couple of buttons here. Audio sources, sorry. And first of all, what I might do is just if I, for example, modify these. And put their volume on 1, so that they play, but not play on awake. Let me just show you what will happen here. If I get so I'm just putting you know, just a couple of normal standard audio source objects together that we would use with buttons. And I'm going to take a couple of button objects here, and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to call it koto button. And put koto loop 1. And call it a button. Duplicate that and call this one number 2. And here I'm going to just update these buttons with the audio sources. So koto loop 1 will go into there. And I'm going to put the audio source script on play here just to demonstrate what we're going to do and why. And I'm going to move that button off. First of all, both of these buttons I'm going to resize to 300 by 300. You can see how I'm selecting both of them together. And there's, sorry. And I can move one off to here and the other one off to here. Give them a bit of space. And I might just move these big taiko drums out of the way as well. create a bit more space. The reason for this is that there are these little rectangles around these objects that are the interaction spaces, and I don't want them to overlap. I don't want them to overlap with the sliders too, because then there might be some confusion. Okay, so we've got basically, I'm not going to worry too much about lining them all up, but that can be done using the positions up here or using the grid markers. But I'm just going to do something quick. So what I've done is I've created two more taiko drums that are identical to the other drums here, with one caveat, and that is the sound that they're playing is a looping sample. And if I press play now, you'll see that when I press play, it will play through the entire loop. And then it will finish. But what's not obvious here is that it will actually play from the moment that you press the button, which is not necessarily it might not necessarily have anything to do with what else is happening in the app. So if the app is locked to time and other loops are playing, you've got to be so lucky to get this in sync. As you can see, like I tried to click right at that moment and it sounds wrong and out of time. Which is not a good outcome. So even though all these loops are, synchronized and built together and cut together, they are actually in phase with each other. And if you shift that phase just a little bit, the music will sound catastrophically wrong. So to get around that, we have to make sure that these audio sources play on awake and are in loop mode. And then if we play that, we'll hear both loops together. And it'll be in sync with all of our other grooves. But then if I hit the button again, I'll be out of sync again. So the way the sliders get around that is the sliders control volume. And wouldn't it be great if the button could control volume? Well, if I go to the button and I have a look at the kind of the audio source functionality, right? Which is actually, it's kind of confusing. It's in this button here. If I click on this button, I can see down here there's an interaction zone on click. And if I go to audio source, there's nothing in there that allows me to control the volume. There is a float volume range. We could try that. But I can hear that it's playing, so that didn't work. So what we've got to do is modify Unity, we have to create some new functionalities. And this is common practice in Unity, that you don't have to get very far into it. And it is huge and expansive, and it has so many things that you can do in it. But it's surprisingly how quickly your desire to do things in this universe requires extra functionality to be added to Unity. And how we do that is we use code and scripting. And if you click in your project here, you'll see that there's some scripts in there that I've placed. In particular, there's a script called Button Looper, and you can see there's a little fader down here that can be used to make them bigger. I've got Button Looper, Toggle Looper, and Dancing Image. So if you double click on Button Looper, it will open a program called Visual Studio, which is a coding program. And you can see here there's a script, which the first time you see something like this, it's very, very confusing. And sure, it's in a language that is a markup of machine code. So it is more computer orientated than it is human orientated. And to do scripting, you've got to learn a bit about how to think like a computer, what to do. To go through the architecture of this really quickly, I've made some statements at the beginning of this script with the word using. And what these using commands do is that they allow the script to communicate with things like the inspector and with the basic set of objects that you can find in the menu items. Next, I've got to create a variable. It's a very abstract concept. In Macs, we're using variables all the time. You know, you can create a variable by using a send and receive object. Just putting a number box on the screen and connecting it up to objects is the same sort of thing. And a variable in scripting is really a container in the script to hold some kind of changing value. And what we're going to do here is create a container in this line that we can drag an audio, a game object into. And then we're creating these other things, and it looks really confusing because there's this word void here. This is the C# word for function, and in Unity, when we're looking at something like a button or whatever, and there's all these interactions down here, we can click in here and find these functions. And what I'm doing in the script is creating a function that will now appear in this menu. And then I want that to connect these two game objects together so that the message from the button can be sent through to the audio source to control its volume. So see if you can follow this logic here. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of this button interaction because it doesn't do what we want it to do. Next, I'm going to click on this Button Looper script, and I'm going to drag it down onto the taiko drum button over here. That's probably the best way to do it. And by doing that, the script is added to that game object as a component. So on the end of our train here, we have a new little script, And there's the container for our data. The data type is a game object. Sounds confusing. But what I've done in that, by creating the script that way, it modifies the inspector in Unity to show a place here where I can link the corresponding audio source. Oh, and I just realized I've been doing it on the wrong button. So I'm going to undo and undo again. And I'm going to make sure that I connect it up on this. So once again, I'm going to deactivate the button interaction. I'm going to add button looper onto this Koto. Next, I've got to connect the Koto loop 1 audio source. And I've now tied this script to that audio source to control that audio source. And you might think it's ready to go, but I have to actually link an interaction now. And if I go back to here, I've created what I've done is create two functions here. One function, when I press the button down, it will send to whatever audio source has been dragged into that inspector window. I will find its volume and set the volume to 1. The next function says when I lift the button off, I want that audio source volume to be 0. And the thing is, I have to give these functions names that will stand out and be different to the ones that are built into Unity. So I've called this one button pressed and this one button released. Now I made those names up so I can see them, but they could be called stew button pressed or button stew or whatever. It's just done in a way that's kind of makes sense. And so if I what I've got to do here is add another component, and I've got to go down to the UI components, and I've got to find the component. Sorry, it's event system. That's what I want. Event trigger. Find this one. And if I add a new event, I can say pointer down. It will create one of these windows that's like the thing that's in the button. But I can't use this one. This one won't give me a connection to two functions. So on the event of a pointer down, I can click in here. And it's now the event trigger is asking me to link this to a button object. And this is a really interesting thing that you might, the first time I saw it, I thought it was really quite dumb. But what I've got to do in this step is grab this object, this game object, which is Koto loop button. And I have to get it to search itself. So go in there and search now, and it will find my script called button looper. And inside there will be button pressed and button released. So I'm going to grab button pressed 1. And then I'm going to add another event for pointer up. And it's already inferred that's going to be the same game object, which is great. But what I have to do here is go and find in the button looper the button released script. Sorry, function in my button looper script. So you may have to watch this video a couple of times and just pause it and go back and look again and look again. So it's a complicated step, but nonetheless, it should work. And we're going to have to set the volume of these audio sources to be on 0. And if I click on the audio source and watch this volume, you can see here when I click the button, the volume goes to 1. And as soon as I release, the volume goes to 0. But the music will now be in sync